Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into the hushed edges of an old tale, a story that claims its roots in the same tangled garden as 1001 Nights. You're standing on a shore that smells of salt and lantern smoke, your feet pressing into damp sand while waves shuffle back and forth like restless storytellers. The horizon is bruised purple, and you can almost feel that the sea is watching you back. Somewhere behind you, an old voice mutters that this is the Sea of Whispers, a place where voices vanish and secrets sink like stones. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your voice intact, but that's half the fun, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and the time it is where you are. I love seeing just how far and wide this sleepy little circle stretches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sand is cold under your toes, and the wind keeps carrying stray words across the waves. At first you think it's fishermen shouting, but the words don't make sense. They feel more like thoughts spoken out loud. People in coastal towns from India to the Arabian Peninsula used to tell these sorts of stories, warning divers that the ocean had ears and a very particular taste for secrets. You tug your cloak tighter as the air grows wetter, like someone wrung out the sky. A lantern sways behind you, casting your shadow long and thin, until it almost looks like the sea itself is pulling it forward. The locals are nervous tonight. A boy with wide eyes runs past, clutching a net that looks older than him, muttering that the tide is speaking too loudly. That's your first hint that this place isn't normal. Whispers slip through the foam, half heard and half dreamed. Some swear it's nothing more than wind over water, the same trick that made medieval monks once think seas could sing hymns on stormy nights. Others insist it's the voices of drowned sailors, though historians still argue whether the earliest pearl diving records from Bahrain really mention ghostly sounds, or if that detail was embroidered centuries later. Either way, you're left standing between skepticism and superstition, exactly where a good story belongs. A figure lingers at the waterline, bent-backed, his skin darkened and tough as leather from years of sun and salt. He's clearly a diver, one of those men who once carried stones tied to their feet to plunge faster toward the seabed. The practice is real. Pearl diving was brutal work for centuries, lungs straining, ears ringing, all for the shimmer of a pearl no larger than your thumbnail. And here he is, staring at you like he's been waiting. He doesn't say hello. Instead, he raises a hand in greeting that looks more like a warning. You take a step closer, sand sticking stubbornly to your damp soles. The whispers intensify, not from the man but from the sea itself, like an audience leaning forward. The diver finally speaks, his voice like gravel ground between teeth. If you walk the shore at night, you've already agreed to listen. Cryptic? Absolutely. But in tales like these, riddles are contracts, and you've just signed your first one. Your stomach tightens, not from fear exactly, but from the uncanny sense that the story is pulling you deeper already. Behind you, the town is alive in muted ways, lanterns swinging above narrow alleys, the metallic clang of pans, laughter slipping out of taverns. And yet, everyone avoids looking at the sea. It's as if ignoring it might make it ignore them back. Quirky detail. In some 19th century travelogues, European visitors to Gulf ports wrote about villagers who covered mirrors during certain tides, fearing the sea's reflection might steal their likeness. Whether that's fact or exaggeration, it echoes eerily now. You glance down at the dark water and swear you glimpse your own face staring back, lips moving even though yours are sealed. The diver motions you closer. His eyes are sharp, but they're not unkind. The sea hears more than it tells, but tonight it wants to trade, he says. That line lodges in your chest, heavy as an anchor. Somewhere out there in the dark, a gull screams and cuts off mid-cry, like something snatched the sound before it reached your ear. The night is thickening, the waves climbing higher. You take one step into the shallow water, and the whispers brush your ankles like minnows. Your pulse keeps time with the tide, and with every second, you feel yourself edging further from the safety of shore stories into something stranger, wetter, and infinitely more patient. The diver extends his hand. The sand shifts beneath your feet as if it's making up its mind whether to hold you or let you go. And in that liminal breath, the sea of whispers takes its first small bite out of your silence. The diver's hand is rough when you take it, the skin ridged and grooved like the coral he's pried pearls from for years. His eyes are steady, but the way they flick toward the water tells you this isn't some casual seaside stroll. Before you step further, he murmurs, you keep your mouth closed. Speak, and the sea will answer, and you do not want its answer. You almost laugh, because let's be honest, if someone said that to you on a real beach vacation, you'd assume they were either a poet or a scam artist. But here, under a bruised sky and a tide that's whispering like a sleep talker, it feels more like an oath. And you know what? You're not about to argue. You nod silently, and in doing so, you agree. The oath of silence feels heavier than it should, like an invisible rope cinched around your throat. Superstitions like this were common in old seafaring cultures. Historical fact check. Ancient pearl divers in the Gulf were sometimes forbidden from speaking before a dive, not for magical reasons, but to conserve breath and focus before plunging into depths that could rupture an eardrum in seconds. Practical, yes, but here it takes on a darker flavour. The diver notices your hesitation. It isn't words the sea hates, he explains in a whisper so low you wonder if he's testing the limits of the vow. It's meaning. Once it catches what you mean, it keeps it. Creepy, definitely. But in a world where people once believed storms could be stirred by the jealousy of spirits, it makes a certain sense. Historians still argue whether medieval navigators really carried charms against sea djinn, or whether that was a later invention by storytellers eager to spice up otherwise dull logbooks. You lean toward the latter, but then the tide seems to exhale at your ankles, and you decide maybe skepticism can wait until you're on dry land again. The diver pulls something from around his neck, a small pouch, stitched with faded thread. He unties it and reveals a single pearl, the size of your fingernail, duller than the one sold in market stalls but strangely warm to the touch when he presses it into your palm. This will keep the voices from crawling too deep, he mutters. You're not sure whether to thank him or drop it, but dropping it feels rude. The pearl sits in your hand like an ear pretending to be a stone. The night air thickens with the smell of salt and fish oil lamps. The town behind you is shrinking into silence, as if the oath is already swallowing noise. Even the market bells that usually clang past midnight are muted tonight. The diver straightens, bones cracking like old rigging, and nods toward the black horizon. Tomorrow we sail. Tonight you listen. That phrase makes sense only when you realise the whispers in the water have grown louder, distinct syllables slithering together into half words. They remind you of the time you woke up from a dream still hearing voices, only to find your roommate hadn't spoken a word. Except here, you're wide awake, and the whispers are spelling out things you thought you'd buried. Childhood regrets, unanswered texts, the song that still gets stuck in your head for no reason. It's unsettling, sure, but also oddly intimate. The diver crouches, scooping up wet sand, letting it drizzle back into the waves. They test you, he says. If you answer, you feed them. His mouth twists like he's remembering something best left unspoken. You suddenly wonder how many vows he's broken in his long years, and what words the sea still owns from him. To distract yourself, you glance at the pearl again. Its surface glimmers faintly, almost like it's fogging over with breath. That's when the joke lands in your head. Congratulations, you now own the world's creepiest mood ring. If it starts playing Spotify recommendations based on your anxiety level, You're throwing it back into the tide. The wind changes, carrying a strange sweetness, like dates fermenting in the sun. Odd detail. In some medieval travel accounts, sailors swore that certain seas smelled different before storms, sometimes sweet, sometimes metallic. Meteorologists today shrug and point to algae blooms, but you kind of like the idea of the sea sending scented warning notes, like a passive-aggressive roommate. Tonight's scent feels less like a storm coming, and more like a warning that tomorrow's silence will be harder to hold. The diver straightens again, staring out to sea as though he's reading a text written across the waves. When dawn comes, he says, you'll bind the oath with breath. Until then, don't answer. Not me, not them. His voice sharpens. Not even yourself. That's when you realize how serious this is. Speaking aloud is one thing, but what if you hum, or sigh, or even yawn? The sea, apparently, isn't picky. It'll snatch up any meaning, however small, like a cat hoarding bottle caps. You tighten your jaw, already hyper-aware of every breath. The diver turns and walks up the shore toward a shack barely visible in the gloom. You follow, pearl clutched in your hand, silence dragging behind you like a net. Inside, the shack smells of ropes, tar, and the faint musk of loneliness. He gestures to a corner mat where you can sit. Sleep, he commands, though you suspect he doesn't mean the peaceful kind. The whispers outside do not fade. They circle the shack, brushing against the wood like invisible fingers, testing the seams. You lie down anyway, staring at the low ceiling, trying to steady your thoughts. It strikes you then that you've agreed to a vow without really knowing the price. That's how most good stories begin. Half ignorance, half courage, and a whispering tide eager to collect the difference. You wake to the sound of voices, though not the ones you expected. Outside the shack, the market is stirring, faint bells chiming, donkeys braying, the haggling tones of merchants already debating the worth of fish before the sun has burned away the mist. It feels almost normal until you remember the vow. You keep your lips pressed shut, even when a yawn begs to escape. Silence is your armour now. The diver waits for you by the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed as if measuring whether the sea has claimed you yet. He nods when you step outside and gestures toward the winding alleys that lead to the night bazaar. You must listen before you sail, he mutters. Every market carries its warnings. The streets are alive with colours that glimmer even in dawn light. Bright fabrics ripple like trapped sunsets. Jars of spices gleam in warm hues, and lamps hang in clusters, catching the last sleepy shadows. The air is a stew of scents, cardamom, cumin, hot oil, and the sharp salt of drying fish. You keep to silence, watching, absorbing, and feeling the pearl in your palm grow faintly warmer. Merchants' voices rise and fall, sometimes in argument, sometimes in laughter. You overhear scraps of their conversations, snippets about a fisherman who claimed his net returned without rope, about a woman who swore she saw a drowned husband walking the dunes, about pearls that sang lullabies if held against the ear. Half superstition, half business tactic. Because let's be real, mystery sells. Historical fact, medieval bazaars often bundled real trade with whispered legends. A merchant selling frankincense might claim it had been blessed by monks in Ethiopia, while one selling pearls might swear they were fished from the mouth of a sea dragon. Whether buyers believed or not, it added flavour to the deal. You pause near a stall draped with ropes of pearls, small ones clustered like grapes, larger ones displayed in polished boxes. The vendor, an older woman with coal-darkened eyes, taps one pearl with her finger and leans toward you. Some pearls are blind, she says, but some see everything you've ever thought. Her words make your pearl twitch in your hand, like it doesn't appreciate the competition. You nearly chuckle. If pearls really did keep track of your thoughts, Yours would already be exhausted from rerunning that one embarrassing memory of you tripping in front of your crush in 8th grade. The diver frowns at the woman but says nothing, and you remember your vow. You simply nod politely, lips sealed. She squints, then shrugs. Ah, you've already promised yourself to the sea. Her tone is half pity, half admiration. You feel the market grow quieter around you, as though her words marked you out to anyone listening. As you continue through the bazaar, you notice more murmurs. Men sipping coffee lower their voices when you pass. A boy selling figs watches you like you're already part of a story he'll repeat tonight. The diver leans close enough for you to smell the salt clinging to his beard. They know, he says, once you've sworn silence, the sea claims you. The land hears it too. The market is full of trinkets that promise protection, amulets shaped like fish, beads strung with coral, even jars of ink with charms written on parchment. Quirky tidbit. Some coastal cultures actually believed writing verses on parchment and sealing them in glass could keep jinn away from divers. Archaeologists have dug up fragments of such charms, though historians still argue whether they were truly for sea voyages or just recycled prayers tucked into jars by anxious merchants. Still, the idea of carrying a waterproof contract with the divine, not the worst plan. One stall in particular catches your attention, a table spread with seashells that hum faintly when picked up. A boy demonstrates by holding one to his ear. The sound inside is less a roar of waves and more like voices murmuring. He grins, showing a gap-toothed smile. They speak, he says. Sometimes they even tell jokes. You raise an eyebrow. If one of those shells cracks wise at you, you're done. But when the diver picks one up, presses it to his ear, and goes pale, you realise the joke's not on you. He slams it back down and stalks away without explanation. You follow him through the shifting crowd. Lanterns are being doused as the sun climbs, but the bazaar feels darker somehow. The voices of the merchants blur into a chorus, and for a moment, you can't tell whether it's the people or the whispers seeping in from the sea. The diver finally halts at a stall selling ropes and nets. He grips a coil of rope like it's an anchor. We leave tonight, he says firmly. The market has spoken. You glance back once more at the rows of stalls, at the pearls and spices and amulets, and realise that every word, every warning, every half-truth is meant to prepare you. The sea of whispers doesn't just demand silence, it feeds on the stories told about it, and in this market, the air is thick with stories. You clutch the pearl tighter, its warmth pulses in rhythm with your heartbeat, as if agreeing. You don't speak because you can't, but the thought slips unbidden through your mind. The sea is already listening. By the time night sinks its teeth into the horizon, the diver has led you away from the bustle of the bazaar and down toward a harbour that smells of salt, tar, and fish scales drying in the heat. Lanterns bob on the water, their reflections trembling like nervous stars. Boats creak against their moorings, the sound rhythmic, almost like the harbour itself is breathing in its sleep. Your eyes find the vessel meant for you. Honestly, you've seen sturdier IKEA furniture. Its hull is patched with planks so mismatched you'd think the ship was a jigsaw puzzle someone assembled in the dark. Nails jut out at odd angles, and faded charms hang from the mast, seashells strung with twine, small blue beads against the evil eye, and even what looks suspiciously like a child's sandal nailed to the prow for luck. You're not reassured. The diver notices your look and smirks. The sea respects courage, not wood, which is the exact kind of thing someone says right before their boat sinks like a stone. Still, you follow him aboard, the planks groaning beneath your weight, as if the vessel itself is complaining about your decision-making skills. A handful of sailors are already there, tying knots and muttering in the low, resigned tones of men who know better but sail anyway. One offers you a cup of something that smells vaguely of dates and smoke. You shake your head, remembering the vow. The diver answers for you. This one has no voice to spare. That earns you a mix of nods and sidelong glances, like you've just been stamped with property of the sea. The crew works quietly, and you notice they avoid whistling or humming. Historical fact, sailors across many cultures considered whistling on a ship to be bad luck, believing it could stir up storms by mimicking the wind. Here, silence feels even more deliberate. They know the sea is listening. The diver hands you a coil of rope. You don't need it, but he insists. Every hand on board is bound to the voyage, he says. You grip it, the coarse fibres biting into your skin, and the pearl in your pocket grows warmer, like it approves of this new tether. The boat shudders as it pulls free from the dock. The harbour shrinks behind you, its lanterns flickering like distant fireflies. Ahead, the dark sea stretches wide and endless, swallowing the stars one by one as clouds gather. A shiver runs down your spine. The captain, an older man with a beard like weathered rope, leans against the mast. He doesn't introduce himself, but he does bark an instruction at the crew to keep eyes sharp and hearts steady. Then he mutters something you almost miss. The sea loves fear. Give it none. Easy advice, sure, but considering the deck just made a sound like it sneezed, fear seems unavoidable. As the boat glides further out, the world shifts. The air is thicker, wetter, and the usual chatter of gulls has gone silent. Quirky tidbit. In some Arabian folk tales, people believed gulls carried fragments of drowned sailors' souls. Seeing none tonight is either a good omen or proof that all the souls have already been collected. You lean on the rail, staring into the black water. It feels like staring into a mirror that refuses to give your reflection back. Then, faintly, you hear it. Not the crew, not the diver, but the sea itself. Whispers rise from the waves, brushing your ears like strands of hair. They don't form full words yet, but the rhythm is unmistakable, like a crowd gathering breath. You glance at the diver, but he only tightens his grip on the mast and closes his eyes. Clearly, this is expected. The boat sways, and one of the charms strung along the mast clinks softly. A bead, a shell, a coin. The sound is ordinary enough, yet every sailor stiffens. You realise they're listening for patterns, for any hint that the sea has answered. Historians still argue whether sailors truly believed in omens as much as later storytellers claimed. Some say it was exaggerated, while others insist rituals like spitting over the side or carrying iron nails were considered essential. Whatever the truth, tonight this ragged crew is treating every creak like a sermon. The diver approaches you, his shadow long and wavering under the lantern light. "Remember," he whispers, "silence keeps you invisible." You nod. Your throat feels parched, but you dare not clear it. Even a cough might betray you. The boat dips as if bowing to the dark water. For a moment, you think you see shapes beneath the surface, curves like arches, flickers of pale glow. Your heart kicks against your ribs. The whispers rise again, almost playful this time, like the sea is amused at your attempts to stay calm. You grip the rope harder. The night deepens, stars peeking through gaps in the clouds. Somewhere far off, lightning flickers and thunder rolls faintly behind it. The captain spits into the sea, muttering a prayer you can't decipher. You resist the urge to ask what it was. You're not allowed words, and besides, maybe it's better not to know. The diver takes his place beside you, staring out at the same horizon. "This boat has carried me and mine for decades," he says softly. "It's not the wood that matters, it's whether the sea feels your fear." He pauses, then glances at you with a faint smile. "So if you're afraid, just don't let it see." "Yeah, no pressure." You nod again, forcing your shoulders to loosen, even as your pulse drums like frantic oars. The sea is watching, the boat is creaking, and silence is the only armour you've got. Whether it'll hold, well, that's tomorrow's problem. The night stretches wide, and soon the only things left to keep you company are salt, stars, and the low rumble of wood against water. The boat has settled into its rhythm, creaking with every wave like an old storyteller clearing his throat before another tale. The crew sits in small clusters, their work done until dawn, each man silent but restless, as though the sea itself forbids idle chatter. It's the diver who finally breaks the hush, not with words wasted on small talk, but with something closer to ritual. He sits cross-legged on the deck and taps the wood with his knuckles, slow and deliberate, a beat that pulls the others closer. They circle him like children around a campfire, though the flames tonight are lanterns swaying nervously against the breeze. You edge in too, not out of comfort but curiosity. And then the stories begin. One sailor starts with a legend about a king who chained a djinn to the floor of the sea, supposedly. The chains were forged of silver hammered during an eclipse, and every time lightning flashes above, you're seeing sparks from that same binding. You can't help but grin, because if this were true, meteorologists would have a lot of explaining to do. But even as you smirk inwardly, the sea growls softly against the hull, as though reminding everyone that jokes have consequences. Historical fact. Pearls were once considered among the most prized treasures of the Arabian Gulf, traded along routes that reached as far as Rome and India. Divers often carried nothing but nose clips and weighted stones, plunging deep to gather oysters in baskets before surfacing on lungs stretched to breaking. Some drowned, some surfaced bleeding from ears and noses, yet the promise of wealth kept them returning. That's the grit buried in these legends, myth sprouting from the soil of brutal reality. Another sailor, younger and sharper in voice, leans forward. They say not all pearls are born of oysters, he whispers. Some grow inside drowned men, feeding on their last breath. The group mutters uneasily. You imagine some poor archaeologist centuries from now trying to prove or disprove that theory with a straight face. Historians still argue whether ancient references to blood pearls were metaphorical or literal. Tonight, the word feels less like poetry and more like warning. The diver finally speaks, his tone low enough to blend with the whispers in the waves. There is a cavern under the coral where voices gather. If you listen long enough, you'll hear the one you miss most. But the price... He cuts himself off, shaking his head. The sailors wait, but he doesn't continue. You wonder if the silence is mercy or fear. A breeze stirs, rattling the charms tied to the mast. The shells clink, the beads thud, and for an instant the sound weaves into the rhythm of the stories. It almost feels orchestrated, like the sea is playing percussion for the tales being told about it. A chill pricks your arms. One sailor tries to lighten the mood with a joke about a fisherman who married a mermaid and regretted it when she insisted on keeping the bathtub full. It earns a few thin chuckles. You can't laugh aloud, vow still binding your lips, but inside you're grateful for the absurdity. It's a reminder that humour has always been a lifeboat for people staring into the abyss. The stars above are brilliant, scattered like pearls across a black velvet cloth. The constellation Orion tilts overhead, his belt pointing towards Sirius, the dog star. Quirky tidbit. In medieval navigation, sailors often relied on the rising of Sirius to mark the beginning of the pearl diving season. The sea and the stars were partners, whether in guiding trade or shaping myth. You tilt your head back, and for a dizzying second, it feels as though the stars are reflected not above but below, shimmering deep in the black water. The diver notices your gaze. Do not confuse what is above with what waits below, he says. His words are sharp, but his eyes soften, as though he once made the same mistake. The stories continue, blending fact and fable until you can't tell one from the other. A tale of sailors who swore they saw lanterns glowing under the waves. Another of pearls that whispered names when touched. The boat seems smaller now, pressed on all sides by water thick with memories. And all the while, the whispers in the sea keep threading through, as if correcting or approving each story told. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm wash over you, Creaking wood, murmured myths, whispers from the waves, and the steady drum of your own heart. The vow of silence feels less like a chain and more like tuning in to the right frequency. You're no longer just a passenger. You're part of the story being told tonight. One more voice folded into the silence. And somewhere, just below the surface, something listens back. By dawn, the sea is the colour of old glass, greenish and faintly luminous. The horizon bleeds with pale light, but the ocean below still hums with its strange voices. Sleep hasn't touched you. Not really. Instead, you've drifted in and out of a half-dream where the whispering waves seem to slide into your ears like ink seeping into parchment. The crew stirs to life with the sunrise. Ropes slap against wood, baskets are stacked, and someone sharpens the long knives used for prying open oysters. The diver, quiet as always, checks his weights, stones wrapped in rope, worn smooth from years of plunges. He presses one into your palm, letting you feel its cold, dense weight. Without words, he reminds you, down there, weight is both ally and enemy. Too light, and you'll fight to sink. Too heavy, and the sea might keep you forever. You set the stone down quickly, a fact to anchor you in history. Pearl divers in the Arabian Gulf often descended 30 to 50 feet without modern gear. They wore simple nose clips made of turtle shell or bone and carried baskets woven from palm fibres. Some attached their fingers with strips of cloth to keep them from splitting in the salt water. And always, they surfaced gasping, desperate for air, while their shipmates hauled them up with ropes like fish caught on invisible lines. The sailors move with muscle memory, as though rehearsing a sacred play. The captain calls out the first chant of the day, a rhythm to coordinate the dives. It's not just music, it's timing. Divers must leap and rise in turn so the crew can pull them back safely without tangling lines. You can feel the chant vibrating through the deck boards beneath your feet. But even with all this order, there's an unease today. The whispers below have grown louder with the sun, not softer. Usually, myths stay in their corners during daylight, scurrying like shadows back under rocks. Today, they linger. When the first diver splashes into the water, a hiss runs along the surface like a voice cut short. You lean over the side, watching his body drop into the green. The rope snakes down, taut with his weight. For a moment, everything is ordinary. Bubbles, the faint outline of a man, the tugging rhythm of the rope. But then you notice something else. A shimmer. Faint, but distinct. Moving alongside him. At first, you think it's sunlight slicing through waves. Then it moves against the light, coiling like smoke underwater. He surfaces minutes later, coughing, triumphant, his basket heavy with oysters. The shimmer does not surface with him. Instead, it lingers just below, as if waiting its turn. The men cheer his catch, their voices rough but relieved. You keep your silence, though every instinct begs you to break it and point at what you saw. Yet your vow holds you tighter than fear, and besides, maybe they see it too, and simply choose not to acknowledge it. Some truths are safer unnamed. The second diver prepares. He's younger, nervous, fingers trembling as he knots the rope around his waist. The older sailor claps his back with a grin too wide, too practiced, like a mask against bad omens. You watch the younger man descend, his body slicing clean into the sea. The water swallows him whole, and again the shimmer follows. This time, it lingers longer. The rope grows taut, then slack, then still, too still. Shouts erupt, men heaving on the line. The silence you've kept suddenly feels heavier than the stone weight you held earlier. The boy surfaces at last, limp, coughing water from his lungs, his face pale as pearl. The shimmer dissolves just beneath him, retreating like a hand slipping back into the dark. The captain barks orders. The boy is laid out on the deck, shivering and wide-eyed. His lips move, shaping words you can't hear. But the diver, crouched beside him, listens intently, his face darkening. Then, in a voice low enough to curdle the air, he repeats the boy's murmur. It whispered my name. You don't know whether it's fear or fascination that roots you in place. The vow of silence feels unbearable now, but you hold it, because some part of you suspects speaking would only invite the whispers closer. Fact again, to tether you. Divers often described auditory hallucinations while underwater, a product of pressure, lack of oxygen and exhaustion. But how easily does history label terror as hallucination? The boy's eyes say otherwise. The day stretches on, each dive heavy with tension. More oysters are hauled up, but fewer men laugh as the shells are cracked open. Some yield pearls, small and pale, glistening like trapped moons. Others yield nothing but flesh, raw and disappointing. And once, just once, one shell opens to reveal something black. Not a pearl, not stone, but something that writhes before collapsing into mush. The sailors discard it quickly, pretending it was never there. By midday, the sun burns high. Sweat stings your eyes, and the salt in the air feels thicker than breath. Yet beneath it all, the sea still whispers. Sometimes it sounds like names. Sometimes it sounds like laughter. Sometimes it sounds like nothing human at all. And each time you remind yourself silence is survival. The sun tilts west, laying a path of gold across the waves, but the mood on deck does not brighten. You've learned quickly that a pearl diving voyage is less about treasure and more about endurance, sunburn, thirst, aching arms, and the gnawing dread of what might be waiting below. The whispers grow restless with the changing light, like children denied attention too long. The diver, who seems to carry a permanent hush about him, begins preparing for a descent deeper than any yet attempted. His hands move in ritual, checking ropes, inspecting the basket, rubbing resin on his palms for grip. He doesn't look at you, but you sense he knows your vow weighs heavy. And still he says nothing, as if words themselves might call the sea closer. Fact anchor, by the late medieval period, pearl diving had already been a cornerstone of Gulf economies. Pearls from Bahrain and Oman were coveted across Europe and India, traded in bazaars where spices and silks shared space with the sea's hidden gems. They were symbols of wealth, purity, and ironically, silence. In some courts, wearing a pearl was considered a vow of virtue. You can almost laugh at the cruel symmetry. Men risking their lives in silence to bring pearls to kings who flaunted them in noisy halls. The chant begins again, slower, heavier, as if even the crew senses something different about this dive. The diver grips the rope, looks once at the horizon where sky meets water, then vanishes into the green with hardly a splash. The rope hisses through the sailor's hands. Seconds pass, then minutes. The rope thrums faintly, like the string of a lute plucked by unseen fingers. The men exchange nervous glances. You lean over the side, squinting into the depths, and there it appears again. The shimmer, not faint this time, but sharp, defined, like scales catching firelight. It circles the diver, coiling tighter with each pass. And then you hear it, not just whispers, but a chorus, layered voices spilling from below, overlapping, too many to track. They curl into your ears, your mind, your chest, pressing like water against glass. They speak in no language you know, yet you understand them in the marrow of your bones. They're offering, bargaining, demanding. The rope jerks violently. The crew braces, hauling with every muscle, teeth bared against the strain. When the diver finally surfaces, it's not in triumph, but in collapse. His basket floats beside him, empty except for one oyster. He clutches it like a relic, fingers white-knuckled. They haul him aboard, and for the first time, you see fear on his face. Not exhaustion, not salt-stung pain, but true fear. He lays the oyster down carefully, almost reverently. When it is cracked open, the deck goes silent. Inside is a pearl larger than any you've seen, perfectly round, glowing faintly, not with the soft lustre of the moonlight, but with something closer to fireflies caught in glass. The glow pulses as if the pearl has a heartbeat. No one touches it. Even the captain, hardened by decades of storms and greed, keeps his hands tucked behind his back. The diver whispers, and though you can't hear his words, you know what they mean. Not natural. Historical debate to anchor you. Some scholars argue that legends of cursed or glowing pearls arose from exposure to bioluminescent plankton or unusual minerals within oysters. Others suggest these stories were inventions, crafted to elevate pearls into mythic status for trade. But you, standing here with a faint glow warming the deck, know this is no invented tale. One sailor laughs nervously, too loud, as though trying to break the spell. He mutters about fortune, about riches. He reaches out, only to be smacked across the knuckles by the diver, who glares with more fury than sound. The man retreats, grumbling, but his eyes never leave the pearl. The whispers swell again, louder now, almost jubilant. You can feel them brushing the back of your throat, urging you to speak, to acknowledge them. The vowel presses down harder, like chains across your tongue. You bite it back. Night creeps quickly in these waters. Shadows stretch long over the deck and lanterns are lit. The pearl continues to pulse, as though syncing with the rhythm of the sea. The crew avoids it, moving around as if it were a hole in the floor. Yet you can sense their thoughts circling it like gulls over a carcass. Riches beyond measure, and danger too. Fact again, pearl divers often believed the sea was alive with spirits, benevolent and malicious. Some left offerings before diving, tossing dates or coins into the water. Others carved protective symbols onto their boats. Tonight, the crew does neither. Instead, they drink in silence, eyes darting toward the glowing pearl. You find yourself thinking, perhaps this voyage isn't about oysters and pearls at all. Perhaps it's about listening and surviving whatever whispers back. The night air thickens, warm and heavy, pressing salt into your pores. The sea glows faintly in places where plankton stir, tiny constellations on black water, and still the pearl beats softly, like a second heart for the ship itself. The diver sits near it, cross-legged, watching without blinking. He has become its guardian, or maybe its prisoner. You don't know which. What you do know is that sleep will not come easy, not with the sea whispering, and not with that pearl pulsing faintly in the dark. The night slides forward like a slow tide, and the glow of the pearl refuses to dim. You try closing your eyes, but even through your eyelids you swear you see it pulsing, faint, steady, hypnotic. It becomes impossible not to wonder if it is the source of the whispers, or if it is merely their lure, the bait dangling from the sea's hidden hook. The crew mutters in low tones, voices kept to hushed fragments. Men who only hours ago barked chants and laughter now speak as if in a cathedral. They circle the pearl the way moths circle a flame, drawn and terrified at once. One man whispers that a pearl of this size could ransom a city. Another mutters that no buyer alive would dare touch it. Both statements could be true, and that paradox is more dangerous than the sea itself. Fact to ground you. In some medieval courts, pearls the size of a fingernail could pay for a year's worth of soldiers' salaries. Imagine what a gem like this might mean. It's said Cleopatra once dissolved a pearl in vinegar to impress Mark Antony, proving her wealth was beyond comprehension. But even her extravagance never touched this kind of otherworldly glow. The captain sits apart, face locked in storm clouds. He is a man of charts and ledgers, not omens, yet even he cannot ignore what beats on his deck like a second pulse. He fingers his beard, muttering about markets, about merchants in Basra or Baghdad, about whether such a prize might elevate or destroy his name. The diver says nothing, but his silence is louder than their muttering. His eyes never leave the pearl, as if looking away might let it slip back into the sea. His stillness unnerves you more than the whispers. The tide turns strange as midnight approaches. The water, usually restless, goes glassy, still enough to mirror the stars. Yet when you look closely, the reflections don't match the sky above. A constellation shifts out of place. A star burns where none should exist. You blink hard, but the wrongness remains. The whispers build. They are no longer background noise, but words brushing against comprehension. They speak of a deep kingdom and a debt long unpaid. They laugh at the frailty of lungs, at the trembling of men. And most chilling, they call to you by name. You never told them your name. A sailor breaks. He snatches for the pearl, muttering that he'll sell it himself, that fortune belongs to the brave. His hand barely grazes its surface before he screams and collapses. The crew rushes to him, but his fingers are blistered, as if burned from within. The pearl continues to pulse, utterly untouched. The captain curses, ordering the pearl thrown overboard. The diver snaps his gaze up, fierce as a hawk, shaking his head. His voice finally cuts the air, low, hoarse, but steady. If it goes back, it will bring them with it. The phrasing chills you more than the injury, because it implies something waits just beyond the black horizon, eager for invitation. Debate to anchor. Historians still argue whether sailors' tales of cursed treasures were propaganda from rulers trying to control trade, or whether they arose from genuine seafaring superstition. But what you're seeing here doesn't care for academic debates. It feels like standing between myth and fact with no safe ground to step onto. The wounded sailor lies shivering, his eyes rolled white. The crew avoids touching him, as if his burns might spread like contagion. You force yourself to stay back too, though guilt prickles. His groans merge with the sea's whispers until it's impossible to tell which is which. Lanterns sway in the night breeze, shadows rocking across the deck, and then you notice it. The sea itself is glowing faintly, not just in patches of plankton, but in wide stretches, as if the water itself is waking up. Shapes flicker just beneath the surface, long and sinuous, coiling around the hull without a sound. The pearl on the deck beats faster, its rhythm matching the glow outside. The diver places his hand near it, not on it, but close, as if testing heat from a fire. His lips move in what looks like prayer, though you can't hear the words. You wonder who he's praying to. God, the sea, or something deeper. The night thickens. You find yourself half dreaming, half waking, lulled and frightened at once. The whispers slip into your head like dreams not your own. They show you visions, palaces of coral, thrones of bone, processions of pale figures carrying pearls the size of suns. You blink, and the deck returns, lanterns swaying, sailors shifting uneasily. And yet the images cling like seaweed around your ankles. Fact again, divers sometimes reported seeing cities beneath the waves, mirages caused by refraction and exhaustion. Skeptics dismiss these visions as tricks of the eye. But the details you just witnessed, the carved arches, the moving faces, felt too precise, too deliberate to be illusions. The night ends not with sleep but with exhaustion. The whispers lull for a time, settling into a steady hum like a giant's breath. The pearl dims slightly, though it never loses its pulse. The diver keeps watch beside it, eyes never closing. The crew drifts in uneasy naps, muttering in their sleep. You stay awake longer than you should, staring at the horizon. For the first time, you dread the sunrise, because if the whispers grow stronger at night, what will daylight reveal? The horizon bruises with dawn, streaks of pink and grey smudging the edge of the sea. The air is heavy, humid, the kind of morning where even breathing feels like effort. Normally, dawn is a relief on a voyage, new light, new hope. Today, it feels like a stage curtain rising on the next act of a play you wish would end. The pearl still sits on the deck, dulled to a faint shimmer after the feverish glow of the night. Yet even in its quiet state, it radiates unease. You can almost hear it breathing, a steady throb beneath the creak of ropes and the slap of water against the hull. No one dares touch it. The burned sailor lies in the shade, feverish and mumbling, skin blistered in angry lines. His groans mix with the gull cries overhead, until the sounds blur into one another. The diver rises, his joints stiff, eyes shadowed but alert. He inspects the pearl, not as a greedy man would, but as a watchman might regard a prisoner. You catch the faintest shake of his head, like someone calculating risks he'd rather not name. He picks up his weights, straps them to his waist, and looks to the sea. He is going down again. A fact to ground you. Divers in the Gulf often worked in exhausting shifts, sometimes making dozens of descents in a single day. A typical dive lasted less than 2 minutes, but multiplied over hours. The strain on lungs and body was brutal. Death from shallow water blackout or entanglement was tragically common. Still, the demand for pearls made the risk constant. The crew protests, voices rising. They whisper of curses, of omens. One mutters that the glowing pearl is a bride price for the drowned. Another insists it should be cast into the sea, no matter the diver's warning. Historians still argue whether such superstitions came from genuine belief, or whether they were strategies to control fear. But either way, fear is thick on this deck now. The captain silences them with a bark. He orders the dive to continue, his eyes flashing toward the pearl like a gambler refusing to fold. Wealth gleams in his gaze more than wisdom. The diver doesn't wait for further debate. He grips the rope and plunges. This time, you lean over the side without hesitation. The water swallows him, bubbles rising, the rope running taut through sailors' hands. And there it is again, the shimmer. Not one coil this time, but many. Threads of light twining and untwining in the green. They twist around the diver like dancers, sometimes vanishing, sometimes flaring bright. You hear the whispers rise, not soft but insistent, layered like a chorus demanding attention. You nearly break your vow then, nearly shout a warning, but something in you knows words will not help. Perhaps the vow is what keeps the voices from rushing fully inside. So you clench your jaw and stay silent. The rope jerks, too sharp, too sudden. Men haul hard, grunting, faces red. The diver surfaces, coughing, clutching something against his chest. It is not a basket of oysters this time. It is another pearl, smaller than the first, but dark, almost black, with veins of faint blue fire running through it. The crew stares, horror-struck. This one doesn't glow steadily, it flickers, pulsing like lightning trapped in stone. The diver sets it down beside the larger pearl. For a moment, nothing happens. Then both begin to pulse in unison, as if recognizing each other. The rhythm spreads, into the deck beneath your feet, into the water lapping the hull, and then the sea answers back. The water around the ship boils with motion. Shapes surge just beneath the surface, too quick to define, too many to count. The whispers roar into voices, overlapping, rising, echoing in your skull until you grip your temples. They do not speak in sentences you can repeat, but you feel the meaning. You brought them home. Now the door must open. The crew panics. Men shout, some dropping to their knees in prayer, others fumbling for weapons useless against water. The captain rages at them, his authority splintering. The diver alone remains calm, though his face is pale. He says only one phrase: "It has begun." Fact. To anchor you amidst chaos. Sailors throughout history often described seas coming alive during storms or strange currents. Scholars suggest these were schools of fish, dolphins, or phosphorescent plankton. But storms don't speak your name. Schools of fish don't demand doors be opened. The black pearl crackles faintly, a smell like ozone filling the air. The larger pearl glows brighter, matching its rhythm. Together, they beat like twin hearts, summoning something vast beneath the waves. The water heaves, and for a heartbeat you swear you see it. Arches of stone far below, a gate or palace or ruin, shifting as though breathing. The whispers crescendo. Some crewmen clutch their ears, screaming. One leaps overboard in madness, vanishing into the thrashing glow without a sound. The others stagger back from the pearls as though distance might save them. You're left staring at the diver, who meets your gaze at last. His eyes are steady, resigned, as if he has known this moment all along. He gestures to the pearls, then to the sea. His meaning is clear. This is no accident. This voyage is not about pearls, not about trade. It is about opening something that should have stayed shut. And as the sun rises fully, its light fails to scatter the whispers. Instead, the voices rise louder, clearer, weaving around the ship in a net of sound. The day has only just begun, and already it feels like the sea has claimed it. By midday, the sea has turned against you. Not with a storm, not yet, but with a restlessness that feels deliberate. Waves slap the hull out of rhythm, ropes creak like teeth grinding, and the very air seems charged, as though lightning waits just behind the clouds. The two pearls sit together on the deck, glowing and flickering like conspirators. No one dares move them, not even the captain, though his gaze lingers with a hunger that nearly outshouts his fear. The burned sailor mutters feverishly in his corner. His voice rises and falls, sometimes sounding like prayer, sometimes like mimicry of the whispers themselves. His blisters have grown worse, veins blackened as if ink has spread beneath his skin. The men give him a wide berth. Even you, though guilt burns, can't bring yourself closer. He is already halfway claimed. The diver remains vigilant, perched near the pearls. He looks less like a guardian now, and more like someone waiting for the inevitable knock at a door. His silence deepens, but his eyes tell a story of grim resolve. You wonder what he knew before boarding this voyage, what secrets of the sea he carried unspoken. Fact to anchor you. In medieval Islamic cosmology, seas were often imagined as layered realms. Above, the world of men; below, a world of spirits and monsters; deeper still, realms belonging only to God. Fishermen and divers spoke of jinn lurking in the depths, capable of both blessing and destroying. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were born from encounters with unusual marine life, or if the tales themselves influenced what men thought they saw. Either way, the layering of realms feels uncomfortably close now, as though the pearls have thinned the veil. The crew grows restless. Two sailors whisper about abandoning ship, lowering the skiff and rowing back toward the faint line of land. The captain overhears, and his fury erupts. He strikes them down with words sharp as whips, calling them cowards. But his eyes flick toward the pearls, betraying that he, too, is unsettled. Authority can only stretch so far when the sea itself seems to rebel. The water around the hull grows stranger. At first it seems merely darker, but then you realize it is filled with shapes. Schools of fish dart in tight spirals, their bodies luminous as though lit from within. They churn like a storm trapped underwater. Among them move larger shadows, sleek and deliberate. Fins break the surface, long, jagged, too sharp to belong to any fish you know. They circle once, twice, then vanish, leaving behind only the impression of being watched. The whispers surge, clearer now, almost like a chorus in harmony. They no longer hide behind suggestion, they speak directly, pressing against the inside of your skull. Bring them down, return what was taken, open the gate. Your vow of silence burns in your throat. Every instinct screams to shout at the others, to warn them, to name what you hear. but you bite your tongue, blood rising coppery in your mouth. Somehow you know, if you speak, the voices will pour through you like floodwater through a cracked dam. The captain orders another dive. The crew protests loudly this time, enough that his command hangs fragile in the air. The diver, calm and deliberate, steps forward before the argument can grow teeth. Without waiting, he ties the rope around his waist, straps on the stone weights, and looks to you. His gaze holds something unspoken, as if he knows you hear what he hears. Then, without fanfare, he dives. The rope slithers down, taut and trembling. The minutes drag. The sea grows quiet, eerily so. Even the gulls have abandoned the mast. And then the rope goes slack. The men haul furiously, arms straining. When the diver surfaces, he's gasping, eyes wild. His basket is gone, but in his hands he clutches something far stranger, a fragment of carved stone, slick with algae, heavy as an anchor. He lays it on the deck with a thud. The markings on it are not Arabic, not Persian, not any script you recognize. They curl and spiral like tentacles frozen in writing. The pearls pulse violently at the stone's arrival, their rhythms quickening until the deck vibrates. The whispers roar, not 1,000 voices now, but one vast, unified voice. It echoes inside your bones. The seal is broken. Fact again, ruins beneath the sea have always provoked speculation. Off the coast of Japan, at Yonaguni, strange rock formations still spark debates, natural or human-made. Historians still argue whether they are temples or geology. The slap on the deck in front of you feels like an answer to such arguments, and it is not one you want. The crew recoils. One man spits overboard, muttering curses. Another crosses himself, though you doubt he's Christian. The captain stares at the stone, greed flickering into fear, but still his hand twitches like he longs to claim it. The diver, soaked and trembling, does not let anyone near. He crouches by the stone, hand hovering just above the carvings. For the first time, he speaks directly to you. His voice is ragged, but the words cut clean. They are coming. As if in response, the sea shudders. Not the ship, the sea itself. The water heaves, rolls, then calms, like some giant stirring beneath. The voices echo again, filling the air so thickly you can almost see them shimmer. The day drags on with dread coiled tight. No one eats, no one jokes. The sun burns overhead, but its light feels powerless against the gathering presence below. The pearls and the stone sit together on the deck like pieces of a puzzle you wish had never been solved. And you realize, with a cold certainty, that this voyage is no longer about finding treasure. It is about surviving whatever treasure has found you. You sail deeper into the mist, and the world starts to feel less like sea and more like dream. The air itself turns gauzy, as if the veil between waking and sleeping has thinned. You can't tell whether the tide is pushing you forward or whether you're simply drifting on thought alone. The waves hush against the hull, and in their rhythm you catch whispers, not words you can understand, but syllables that coil around your mind like tendrils of smoke. They tug at your memory, reminding you of lullabies you never learned, promises no one ever made. You're not sure if they belong to the sea or to the echoes of your own imagination. Either way, you're hooked, straining to hear what the water refuses to fully reveal. The first clear image that greets you is not a lighthouse or a shoreline, but a massive stone carved in the shape of an open eye. It sits half submerged in the shallows, iris filled with barnacles, the lid etched with patterns of forgotten alphabets. Historians still argue whether such coastal monoliths were actual religious markers, or simply eroded natural forms that cultures reinterpreted to suit their stories. Standing on the rocking deck, you imagine divers centuries before you swimming toward that staring gaze, convinced it would judge their worth before letting them pass. There's something thrilling about how human beings insist on carving permanence into the very edge of impermanence. Waves smash the rock every day. Yet the carvings endure just long enough to whisper their mystery forward. You step onto the beach, soft sand crunching beneath your feet, and realize the island is no ordinary spit of land. Its soil is black with volcanic richness, though you smell no sulphur, no smoke. Palms sway not with the ocean's breeze, but in sync with some internal rhythm, like dancers who hear music only they can follow. Their fronds rattle together as though applauding your arrival. A single coconut drops at your feet, an oddly theatrical welcome. You half expect a voiceover to congratulate you on reaching level 12 of tropical mysticism. The comedy's not lost on you, though you're a little wary about eating an unsolicited snack offered by an enchanted island. Walking inland, you discover the ruins. They are not the tumbled heaps of stone you might expect, but instead precise geometries. Pillars aligned with uncanny accuracy. Staircases that lead nowhere yet point directly toward constellations. One set of steps rises into empty air but frames the moon so perfectly you'd swear the builders planned for lunar audiences. Quirky detail. In parts of the Pacific, sailors once navigated not with stars alone but by memorizing the feel of swells against their boats, reading the ocean's invisible grid. Maybe the inhabitants of this place did both, charting skies and tides simultaneously, weaving two maps into one. As you wander among the broken halls, you spot frescoes still faintly painted on walls sheltered from wind. They depict divers leaping into spirals of water, arms extended like arrows piercing the deep. Some figures return clutching luminous pearls, others vanish entirely into the coils of the painted waves. It's a reminder of how myths double as cautionary tales, the glory of treasure balanced against the risk of losing yourself. You pause before one mural showing a figure offering a pearl to a giant fish with eyes like lanterns. Is that an allegory, or an ancient eyewitness account of a creature now extinct? Scholars can't agree. Historians still argue whether medieval sailors' reports of glowing sea beasts were exaggerations or garbled sightings of bioluminescent squid. You lean toward the latter, but part of you wants to believe in a fish that once accepted tribute from divers. The deeper you walk, the more the island feels aware of you. Moss clings to your boots longer than it should. Vines curl toward your wrists, and the wind shifts just when you're about to turn back, nudging you further inside. It doesn't feel malicious, more like a host guiding you to the main event. You come to a clearing where the earth has collapsed inward, forming a natural amphitheatre filled with water. The surface gleams like obsidian, utterly still despite the restless ocean only a stone's throw away. You kneel at its edge and peer down. What you see isn't your reflection, but layers upon layers of other faces. Some are stern, others joyful, a few too blurred to recognize. They look back at you not with menace but with curiosity, as if they've been waiting for you specifically. It dawns on you that this is the Sea of Whispers itself, a portal disguised as a pool. One ripple might carry you sideways in time, another downward into memory. You've seen plenty of odd travel brochures in your life, but none ever promised. Dip once for ancestral voices, twice for cosmic karaoke. You hesitate, knowing once you touch, you may not return unchanged. And yet the pull is irresistible. You trail your fingers across the dark surface, and immediately warmth spreads up your arm. Not wetness, just warmth, like plunging into a sunbeam. The whispers intensify, layering until they form something dangerously close to speech. You can almost make out the phrase, "We remember what you forget." Then the pool erupts with concentric rings, and the world tilts. You're not falling. Not exactly. You're being absorbed, drawn into a liquid archive that treats memory as buoyancy. Past, present, and legend mingle here like fish in the same current. You let go, not because you're fearless, but because the island has been nudging you to this moment since your arrival. If there was ever a time to stop resisting, This is it. The last thing you see before everything becomes waterlight is the stone eye on the shore, glowing faintly as if giving its approval. The sea doesn't just whisper now, it sings, and you're part of its chorus. You surface, or at least it feels like surfacing. But you're not in the amphitheatre pool anymore. You're floating weightlessly in a chamber made of liquid walls, as though someone took an ocean and taught it to stand still. The water around you shimmers like blown glass, yet it parts for your breath, lets you exist without drowning. You're suspended, cradled, a diver in an aquarium that has no ceiling and no floor. The whispers are no longer fragments. They've organised themselves into voices, distinct and layered. Some speak in tongues you don't know, others in languages that sound like your own but bent through centuries of erosion. Each voice carries the gravity of an elder telling secrets by candlelight. At first, the words tangle together, a knot of meaning too dense to follow. Then one thread pulls free, stories of pearl divers before you. You see them as if projected into the walls of the chamber. A young woman with seaweed braided into her hair plunges into the depths clutching a stone weight, surfacing minutes later with her hands full of shimmering shells. A man with scars across his back sings to calm himself as he descends, because he believes the ocean recognizes songs more kindly than silence. Quirky fact, in some coastal communities of the Indian Ocean, divers really did carry sharp shells or knives to scare off sharks, while singing to time their breath. And historians still argue whether their songs were purely practical or whether they believed the rhythms actually influenced the sea. You watch these visions ripple past, realizing you're in a sort of collective diary, an archive where memories don't fade but swim eternally, preserved in salt and story. A pearl diver holds up a glowing orb and laughs before handing it to a child on the shore. The child's laughter reverberates through the chamber until you feel it shake your bones. You're witnessing not just history, but emotion, the actual pulse of lives lived. The sea is not content with dates and facts. It insists on sharing the texture of breathing in fear, the thrill of resurfacing alive. One voice grows clearer than the rest. It belongs to an elder diver whose hair coils like kelp and whose eyes glint with something unearthly. He tells you of the first pearl ever discovered, how it was found nestled inside the mouth of a drowned sailor. The pearl, they say, carried not just lustre but his final breath, a bubble hardened into eternity. You roll your eyes slightly at the drama. It sounds like something a myth-loving uncle might make up over too much wine. But still, part of you wonders if that's what gives pearls their strange allure. Not just beauty, but borrowed fragments of human struggle. As the elder's tale fades, another memory takes over. You see ships docking at harbours thick with spice smoke, merchants haggling over baskets of pearls like children trading candy. Historical fact, by the 16th century, pearls were so prized in European courts that nobles stitched them into clothing, sometimes crushing them into powder to mix with drinks, because apparently drinking jewellery was the ultimate flex. You chuckle at the absurdity. Imagine someone ordering a pearl latte with extra foam. Yet, it's real. The pearls symbolise purity, power, and sometimes just plain ostentation. The chamber shifts again, and suddenly you're watching a debate. Yes, a debate acted out by shadows in the water. Figures argue about whether pearls were gifts from the moon, crystallised tears of angels, or merely the sea's trick of hiding treasure inside grit. Historians still argue whether these beliefs shaped pearl trade routes, or whether the economics shaped the myths. It's that old chicken and egg situation, except now you're the chicken bobbing in a pool of cosmic egg salad. The whispers grow softer, more intimate. They start speaking to you directly, not as a crowd, but as individual presences. One tells you your lungs are stronger than you believe. Another insists you'll need to carry a story, not just a pearl, if you hope to return. A third voice jokes that you should have brought a snack, because the journey isn't over yet. You laugh, an odd, startled laugh that bubbles in this weightless chamber. Who knew the afterlife of sea memories had a sense of humour? Then the chamber begins to drain. The walls of liquid fold inward, and you're lowered gently onto a floor of sand shot through with veins of pearl. The whispers fade, leaving a single clear note, like the ringing of a bell underwater. You follow the sound down a narrow passage that opens into another cavern, darker than ink yet studded with faint glimmers. Each glimmer is a pearl lodged into the stone, glowing with the lives of those who found them. You realize you've stepped into the vault of the Sea of Whispers itself, the treasury of stories fossilized into gems. You kneel, running your fingers across one pearl the size of a fist. Instantly, you feel a diver's panic, his heartbeat racing as he tangles in a net below the waves. You pull your hand back, startled, but also humbled. Each pearl is not just beauty, it's a condensed narrative, a lived moment suspended forever. The chamber sighs, the tide shifting behind its walls. It feels like you've been admitted to a secret that wasn't meant for tourists. You're not sure if the sea trusts you or is testing you. Either way, you know this is only the beginning of what it plans to reveal. The vault stretches endlessly, pearls glowing in constellations that echo the night sky outside. You walk between them as if tracing a galaxy carved underground. Each gem hums with its own timbre, a low vibration that prickles your skin, like being inside a cathedral where every hymn is sung at once but in different keys. You pause by one particularly bright pearl, and it thrums louder when you approach. It feels like a heartbeat waiting for recognition. When you touch it, a scene unfurls, a caravan crossing desert dunes, camels trudging under loads of pearls sewn into belts, traders squinting against the sun. Historical fact: during the Abbasid Caliphate, Persian Gulf pearls were among the most valuable commodities carried along trade routes, rivaling silk and spices. Rulers hoarded them as emblems of divine blessing. You see that truth rendered vividly here, every grain of sand sparkling with the weight of wealth. But then the vision flips, showing weary divers coughing blood from burst lungs, their treasures confiscated before they even drew breath. Historians still argue whether those early economies uplifted communities or merely hollowed them out in pursuit of pearls. Standing here, with lungs aching in sympathy, you're inclined toward the bleaker interpretation. You press your palm to another pearl. This time you're under the sea, watching an enormous clam open and close like the slow inhalation of the earth. A diver approaches, trembling, because this is no ordinary mollusk. It's the size of a hut, its shell encrusted with coral like jeweled armour. The diver extracts a pearl that glows faint as moonlight. When he resurfaces, the pearl is immediately taken by a priest who insists it must remain in the temple, a relic of the gods. You can't help but snicker. Nothing says, "Thanks for risking your life," like having your prize whisked away for display beside incense sticks. The vault leads you downward, each step into softer darkness lit only by the pearls themselves. Some are lodged high above, twinkling like stars. Others are buried underfoot, pulsing dimly through the sand like buried lanterns. You wonder whether this place is infinite, whether every diver who ever lived left behind a memory here. Quirky fact: in Japan, ama divers, many of them women, still practice traditional free diving today, though mostly for shellfish. They wear white robes for visibility, and local folklore claims the sea spirits favour their courage. You wonder if somewhere in this chamber, the whispers of those divers float too, keeping company with their global kin. At the heart of the vault you find a pedestal, and on it, a pearl unlike any you've seen. It is black, but not the flat black of night, rather the shifting black of oil on water, swirling with subtle rainbows. It seems alive, rotating slowly on its own axis, radiating a hum so deep it vibrates your teeth. You know instinctively this is the heart of the archive, the memory of the sea itself condensed into one impossible jewel. You reach toward it, half expecting some Indiana Jones booby trap. Instead, the pearl warms beneath your fingertips. The chamber brightens as every other pearl flares at once, their collected histories sinking together. Suddenly, you're not seeing fragments anymore. You're inside the whole story. Generations of divers rise and fall. Civilizations trade and collapse. Oceans shift and reshape coastlines. You glimpse European queens dripping with pearls, Indian maharajas riding elephants draped in pearl-embroidered cloth, explorers boasting of seas discovered, though locals had been diving them for centuries. You feel it all at once, the weight of desire that has tugged at humanity like a tide. It's overwhelming, like watching every season of a show at once without bathroom breaks. You wobble, bracing against the pedestal, and then the black pearl speaks, not with words, but with clarity. It tells you that pearls are less about wealth than about survival. Each is a scar, a defense mechanism, a creature's response to irritation transformed into beauty. And maybe, just maybe, human history mirrors that. Every civilization's treasure born from grit, pain, and the pressure of existence. Historians still argue whether myths of pearls shaped by tears or moonlight arose independently across cultures or spread along trade networks like gossip. Here, the sea seems to shrug and say, both. Humans recycle stories the way oysters recycle sand. You stagger back, the vision fading, the vault dimming once more. The black pearl rests calmly, as if it never stirred. You're left dizzy, yet also oddly comforted, like finishing a bedtime story that makes you question everything but still lets you sleep. The whispers swirl around again, not in warning but in invitation. You sense one last passage waiting, one more descent or ascent before the journey resolves. You've seen the archive. Now you're expected to carry part of it back. You're not sure what weight will cling to your hands, but you know the sea doesn't let anyone leave empty. The pedestal fades behind you, and the vault begins to dissolve. Pearls dim one by one, as though someone is turning out the lights in a theatre after the last show. The hum softens into silence, leaving you with a sense of both ending and expectation. A narrow corridor opens ahead, water streaming through it like ribbons of silver. You follow, because what else can you do? By now, resisting feels like trying to stop the tide with a broom. The passage carries you upward, though there are no steps, just the buoyant lift of unseen currents. Your body drifts weightless, your arms stretched as if in sleep. The walls of the corridor are studded with shells, each snapping open and closed in rhythm, as though applauding your perseverance. You chuckle, imagining them gossiping. Another one survived the vault? We'll see how long they last topside. At the end of the corridor, you surface into open air. You're back at sea, but not the sea you left. This ocean glows with a phosphorescent shimmer, every crest of every wave outlined in blue fire. Above, the sky holds no sun, no moon, only a scattering of stars so sharp they look freshly polished. It's breathtaking, unreal, and for a moment you're convinced you've wandered into a screensaver designed by Poseidon. Floating before you is the black pearl, not on a pedestal now, but suspended directly over the waves. It pulses with quiet authority, a heartbeat in the dark. You know this is the final gift, or test. You reach for it, and when your fingers brush its surface, you don't see pearls or divers or trade routes anymore. You see yourself, your fears, your irritations, your grit, and you see how the sea would transform those raw fragments into something luminous if you let it. The realization is both humbling and oddly liberating. Maybe beauty isn't an escape from pain, but the alchemy of living with it. Historical fact flashes through your mind. When Columbus sailed to the Caribbean, his crew noted native peoples wearing pearls. Within decades, Spanish colonizers forced locals into relentless diving, stripping waters nearly bare. Historians still argue whether the near exhaustion of natural pearl beds in the 17th century changed global trade permanently or whether demand simply shifted to new coasts. Either way, it's sobering. Greed leaves ripples long after the splash. The pearl in your hand vibrates, and you hear a single whisper, "Carry the story, not the stone." And just like that, the pearl dissolves into light, flowing into your chest. Warmth spreads through you, not heavy like treasure but buoyant, as though you've been given a lantern to carry in your lungs. The sea sighs, the phosphorescence fades, and you find yourself drifting back toward the familiar shoreline of the island where you began. The stone eye watches calmly, approvingly, as you stagger onto the sand. The island is quiet now. No theatrics. No coconuts dropping in applause. Just the hush of waves and the slow acceptance of dawn colouring the horizon. You realise the journey was never about finding a pearl to sell, nor about proving bravery. It was about listening to the sea, to history, to the voices buried under time. You laugh softly at yourself, because honestly, you could have just read a book. But no, you had to go full magical diver spiritual adventurer. Still, it was worth it. And as you settle onto the beach, eyelids heavy, you hear the final whisper of the sea of whispers curling around your thoughts. Every pearl begins with irritation. Every story begins with rest. Now that the journey has carried you through darkness and light, through whispers and visions, it is time to let go. You don't need to carry the entire weight of oceans or vaults, or even pearls glowing like stars. You've already taken what you need: the rhythm of the tide, the comfort of voices layered in memory, and the reminder that every rough edge can soften into something luminous over time. Close your eyes and imagine the shoreline again. Sand warm beneath you, waves curling forward with gentle persistence, and above, the sky expanding without limit. Each breath you take follows that rhythm, the inhale rising like a wave, the exhale falling back into quiet foam. You don't need to do anything more than float on that rhythm, the way the sea carried you through its secret corridors. Let your body feel heavier now, as though the sand is cradling you, pressing you just enough to remind you that you're safe, that the world can wait. The whispers of the sea fade into a low hush, like a fan humming at the edge of your room, steady and reassuring. Every sound beyond it grows softer, every thought less sharp, until you're left only with the pulse of rest. Allow yourself to drift the way the pearl drifted in your palm, free of weight, free of demand. You don't need to hold on to the story anymore. It will hold you, even as you sleep. So, with the sea fading gently to silence, let the waves roll you into slumber. May your dreams be calm, your night deep, and your rest unbroken until morning comes softly,